So how many of you got up this morning and thought, you know, I just have way too much influence, and so I'm so glad I'm going to this breakfast to learn how to get rid of some of it? Most people would like to be more influential, and most people are not sure what that would look like or what it would mean to try to do that. And so that's what I want to try to cover with you to some extent this morning. Before I get into how does one gain influence, what are ways in which we can become more influential, let me talk a little bit about why influence has really become the name of the game. Today, influence is more important than ever in most organizations. First of all, this will not come as any great surprise to you. Work increasingly cuts across many boundaries and is interdependent. Very few of us can get our job done without somebody else. Either because of the handoff they've got to do to us or because of the handoff we've got to give to them. And so what happens is there are resources and information and knowledge that exist elsewhere in the organization that we need access to in order for us to do our job well. And of course, what happens then is that we need to find some way to influence people that don't necessarily work for us. People who might be our peers, people who might be above us in the organizational hierarchy, either our boss or someone else's boss. And so influence has become a very important part of high-performing organizations and, of course, of being a successful leader. So even those people who work for you require influence. And the reason I say that is because you can't really order somebody to do their best job. You might order them to do their work. But if what you really want to do is get the best out of them, you might have to also learn how to influence even the people who work for you. Now, lots of people complain that they don't ever get authority commensurate with responsibility. I have all this responsibility, and I just don't have the authority that, you know, is commensurate with it. And that's true. That actually is a reality of organizational life. But what I would argue is that while you might not get authority commensurate with responsibility, you can have influence that's commensurate with your responsibility. That's what I want to talk about today. Now let me just quickly illustrate the point that I've just made with a picture. So a number of years ago we worked with a large oil company, and this was their organization chart. And we were working with the top executive team, and we gave each one of them a marker of a different color. And we said, please draw a line between all the people who need each other in order to get their work done. And of course what we got was an original Jackson Pollock painting. So I think that the picture says 1,000 words, and this is why we need to really develop our influence skills today. So then you might ask, what are the sources of influence? Well, the biggest source of influence in organizations is actually what you produce and how you perform. That's certainly one excellent way to get influence. To make promises and keep them, to be seen as a person who delivers on the things that you commit to, and of course, to be credible and trustworthy. Now, of course, the interesting thing here is for you to do that in this highly interdependent world that we've just described, you actually need access to information and resources and knowledge that might not be immediately at your disposal. So it's a bit of a catch-22. How do I get the influence to get what I need in order for me to perform so that I can have influence? So how do I do this? In order to really understand influence a little bit better, we need to understand two basic concepts, the law of reciprocity and the theory of exchange. All interpersonal behavior involves some form of exchange. In fact, we have an exchange going on right now. The exchange going on right now is that I stand up here with the promise of delivering something of value and interest to you in exchange for you being attentive and participating when I ask you to and listening. So exchange is universal, and it's the basic law of organizations. An honest day's pay for an honest day's work. Perfect example of an exchange. But it happens at all levels, and it happens in all cultures. And let me give you an example of this, how this works. I go to the PTA meeting. I run into my friend Mary and her husband Mark. We haven't seen each other in a while. It's towards the end of the meeting, and we say, and she comes up to my husband Andy and me, and she says, you know, gosh, we haven't seen you guys in a long time. Why don't you come back to the house, have glass of wine. We can talk about that new math teacher we both hate.